Live. So, how's everybody doing? Look, it's still light out at 8 o'clock. I'm outside, but there's nothing much to see. I even have my lights on in my car because I know that it's going to end up getting dark soon enough. So welcome in. This is number 12. Dozen live streams. These are called Without a Map. They go in conjunction with the In My Footsteps podcast. I am the host of that. The funny thing is now, this is the first time that I've mentioned it many times. I do the live streams through my personal page, Christopher Setterlund, because I have a lot more followers. I have an actual podcast page on Instagram, but there's not as many followers, so why in the world would I do it over there? What I did was I made myself a partner with my podcast page. So we'll see if it does anything. But welcome in. I do these every Friday at 8 p.m. Kind of go over the most recent podcast episode, preview the next one. That's usually where it goes, and then it just spills off the rails. I've been doing the last couple weeks, I've been inside. And I liked it because it was light out and there was a nice sunset. I was trying to shoot pictures of the birds at a bird feeder. And I said, why don't I just stay outside? The only problem with this vantage point in my car is my seat. It tilts back just enough so that I literally, it's like my body is closer to the camera and my head is smaller. So that's what's funny. So hope everyone's had a good week. Hope you got outside and enjoyed the 70-degree weather. It was awesome. And a big thank you to everyone who has listened to the podcast. I'm 19 episodes in right now. And yesterday was the 19th episode dropped. And it was also my biggest single day for downloads ever in the podcast. So I really appreciate it. It feels like this is growing. And I started doing ads, Facebook and Instagram ads for the podcast. So I think that kind of has helped too, because episode 17 was the first one I did an ad for, and that's my most downloaded within its first 30 days. And we're kind of going from there. So if you haven't listened, it's everywhere. The In My Footsteps podcast. So this is episode 19. I debuted a new segment called Restaurant Storytime. That's the big selling point I have for this one, because the podcast in and of itself is New England travel, history. There's a good chunk of 80s nostalgia, 90s nostalgia. And I do This Week in History. I do fun and enlightening lifestyle topics. But as we go along, I keep trying to add new little wrinkles to it to kind of increase the audience. Because obviously not everyone is from New England or Cape Cod, or, if you don't like it, I'm shocked. But not everyone is a fan of history or travel or etc. So I try to find things that everybody might enjoy, so that even if you don't listen to the whole podcast, you might come and sample my back in the day segment. You might come and sample, the restaurant story time. So I was in that industry for a long time. And over those years, I accumulated a lot of stories that you can't believe they're real, but they're real. So I decided, why not start sharing those every now and then? And I've got to be careful to not name names, because I don't know if everyone's going to like the fact that I'm sharing these stories. I don't mind humiliating myself or opening up, like pulling back the curtain, I say, on my own life, whatever. It's my podcast. If I embarrass myself, that's fine. Par for the course. But other people might not be as thrilled. So This first restaurant story time has to do with a snowball fight that was a one-way snowball fight indoors. I don't know how much more I want to give away without, like, I want people to go and listen to the podcast. But I'll just say I got in a snowball fight with someone who was not a willing participant and wasn't armed and wasn't outside. It's pretty funny, and it's 100% true. I also do road trips on the podcast. Episode 19 was to Owl's Head, Maine. That was in that little place card for episode 19. It was a picture of Owl's Head Lighthouse in Maine. I don't know if anyone's been there. It's a small town close to Rockland, which is on the mid-coast of Maine. So from Boston, it's 2.5 hours, 3 hours. I would think north of that. I'd highly recommend it if you want quintessential classic Maine. It's hard to describe. I say in the podcast that if I ask you, what do you think classic Maine looks like, and you close your eyes and picture something, you've likely pictured Owl's Head, Maine. And I was lucky enough that I did a long road trip up there. This was 2010. And my cousins had a cottage right on the water that they rented out like an Airbnb. And I got up there the last weekend they were renting it out, and no one had rented it, so they gave it to me for the week. And it was awesome. And that's how I kind of fell in love with that mid-coast Maine area. So if you're not familiar with Owl's Head, definitely check that out. I also have a YouTube video segment from the podcast of Owl's Head with lots of my photos in it. So that'll it's hard to describe. You have to see it. I also do, like I said, retro segments. Back in the day, I'm a child of the 80s, teenager of the 90s, as I say every week. So this time I'm doing my introduction to children's books. So it includes Richard Scarry, who did the Busytown picture books, and Shel Silverstein, who had poetry books, etc. Those are fun. I have so many retro topics lined up, but I'm always looking for anyone out there who is around my age. I was born in 1977. I can't believe that's so long ago now, but if anyone ever has topic ideas, retro things that you're interested in that you don't know if I'm going to cover, you should definitely DM me through Instagram, or if you're watching this after, on IGTV or YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, wherever, just find me. My name is what I use, Christopher Setterlund. There's not too many of me. There actually is one. There is a Christopher Setterlund in Minnesota. I found him on Facebook. He's not my friend, and I don't know if we're related, but he is very much the antithesis of me. When I looked at him, I said, wow, you're literally the opposite. Like, he's got long hair, long beard, and he's larger. So, I mean, I'm getting to larger, but, losing weight and dieting in your 40s is not easy. You can do it. Don't let anyone tell you that it's easy. I've been trying to drop weight to get back into shape, to go back into personal training, like in a gym. And COVID just wiped out my fitness. When you get to the point where it's like, stay indoors and, you can't go to the gym, you can't do this and that. Working out at home you can do, but Jesus, when you're sitting in front of a TV and laptop, you're more apt to do that. So I've been trying to get back in shape. I dropped 10 pounds in the first month, but in the past few days, I've put back on a few pounds. And you know what it is? Anyone out there ever had the Popcorners chips? I wish I had a photo of the bag. So they're like popcorn chips. They look like Doritos or something, but they're popcorn. And they're slightly better for you than regular chips, but slightly is, all relative. They have a brand, Spicy Queso Popcorners. And I've had them every day for the last 3 days with my lunch. And I'm like, yeah, that's the reason why I feel bloated, because I'm eating chips. But yeah, don't let anyone say that dieting and losing weight and getting like back to where you feel comfortable in fitness wise, don't let anyone tell you it's easy, because that'll discourage you if you don't succeed right away. See, this is how the live streams always go. I start talking about the podcast and then it just goes off the rails, but usually in a good way. And like I said, I finish with these. They go right up on IGTV, and I try to put it on Twitter and Facebook, but I try to put it on YouTube with chapters, because if you're watching it live, it's like I always say, I don't have notes for this, so it's kind of stream of consciousness, which is why it goes off the rails. But if you're watching it after the fact, I can group segments together to make it so that if you want to skip around chapters and such on YouTube, it just makes it easier. Because live, you never know what I might say. Like, for example, don't worry, it's not anything bad. So, I went to a thrift shop to donate some clothes. This is just a funny little sidetrack, because this is on my seat of my car. I had 2 full bags of clothes, and I had to make an appointment because it's still COVID, so you can't just go in. I made an appointment 2 weeks ago for yesterday. I was all excited. I'm like, ooh, I'm going to make some money, sell some clothes, because these don't fit. They're clothes that fit before COVID, and I'd rather sell them than... It's easier to sell them than to lose the weight to fit in them again. Oh, Jesus. So I went in there with my 2 full bags of clothes, and I came out with almost 2 full bags of clothes. They're all good clothes too, but I made like $15. Really? I'm not saying that the thrift shop was wrong. I'm just saying I was way too hyped up selling clothes at the thrift shop, and I made like no money. It's like enough to buy dinner. Thanks. So, coming up tomorrow, I actually have anyone out there that likes the podcast, you're going to get overwhelmed with episodes. I have 5 podcasts this month. I've been doing 3 weeks on and 1 week off for 2021. And I mentioned it last week on the live stream. I get a certain amount of minutes per month I can use through my hosting site for the podcast. And what I'd noticed was at the end of my 3 episodes per month that I've been doing, I had a chunk of minutes left over, and they don't roll over. So it's not like you could have extra minutes next month. And I started thinking, I should use those. So the idea is doing a 4th podcast, but it'll be a shorter one. The regular podcast is typically about 50 minutes, give or take, so that it's palatable and you don't have to pause it and go do other stuff and then come back to it. The shorter one is 25 minutes. So I'm going to start doing that. I'm really excited for this, because now I'm going to have no weeks off. I'm like Bill Belichick coaching the Patriots, no days off. Tomorrow is the first such one. So I'm going to grab you the photo of it, because I have a lot of pride in this one, because it's, if you don't listen to any other episode, this one is the most special that I've done so far. It's a celebration of life of my grandpa, who was my hero and my role model, and he passed away 2 years ago tomorrow. So this drops on the anniversary, because I thought, what better way to remember him than to celebrate his life on the anniversary of his death. Rather than mourning his loss, I want to share why this guy was just the patriarch, the larger-than-life figure of my family. So it's 24 minutes, and I talk about him, his life, segue into anyone who's from Cape Cod, Mid-Cape area in the last 40, 50 years. He ran Sullivan's Donut Shop in Hyannis. It was in the Bobby Burns Pub Plaza in Hyannis, if that helps. He grew up in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, so I talk about that. And then I go into what made him my hero. And the gist of it is that even though he was my hero, my grandfather, I want to tie it into anyone out there who, everyone's got a hero and a role model. Everyone does. They may not be in your family, but hopefully if you're lucky, they are. And so I wanted to tie it in and give you back feelings of those people, especially if they're not here anymore. Because once they're gone, they're gone. And hopefully it'll make you appreciate them if they are there. So that's what this is going to be tomorrow. I'm not used to dropping a podcast episode on a Saturday. They're usually Thursdays. I picked Thursday at the start, and now I'm stuck with it because I want, if listeners are creatures of habit and they download it on a Thursday, I'm not going to keep changing. So that's the idea. Tomorrow, episode 20 drops. My stupid photo is over the shamrock, but I switched up the logo and made it green for the Irish and etc. So hopefully you will tune in to that. It's going to be up tomorrow morning. And it's a little bite size. It's like a munchkin compared to a regular donut. Next week, I'm going to have a regular full-length podcast, episode 21. And this one's going to be, I'm really psyched. I'm nothing if not consistent with marketing and promoting myself. I don't think I've done any live stream where I've promoted a podcast that I've said, it's not going to be good, don't listen. So I guess I could be BSing you, where I'm just saying every episode's the best ever. Some are better than others, I'll be honest. And it reflects in the downloads. There's ebbs and flows. But I think episode 21 is going to really be a kick-ass episode. So it starts off, this is for longtime Cape Codders, my age, around my age. Do you remember the Eldia ship that ran aground on Nauset Beach in Orleans? 1984, the end of March. It got pushed ashore in a storm, same storm that knocked down Great Point Lighthouse on Nantucket. So I'm going to talk about, I call it the wreck of the Eldia. It wasn't wrecked. I mean, it ended up getting scrapped, but it's 471 feet long, and I got to go and see it. That's why I remember it. Going over the dunes at Nauset Beach and seeing this ship that was larger than life, and it was still hundreds of yards away, and it was the biggest thing I'd ever seen. Now, granted, I was 6.5 years old, but it was, next week was the week in history where it got taken off the beach and towed away and eventually scrapped. But I talk about that, the wreck of the Eldia. I was psyched to get to finally talk about it. I try to time it with the week of the year that events occurred. So that one's been in the chamber for a while. Also next week is the release of my 6th book. So it's Iconic Hotels and Motels of Cape Cod. And don't worry, I do have a visual aid for that at some point. Yay, there it is. With my stupid face over it. May 24th, this book is launched through Arcadia Publishing. It's the 3rd in my trilogy of Cape Cod history. I did Historic Restaurants of Cape Cod. I did Cape Cod Nights, which was nightlife, bars, and now Hotels and Motels. The marketing plan behind it, and this was what I had the whole time, so if they hadn't agreed to do the 3 books, I'd have been screwed. But it was where you went to eat, then where you went to drink and party after you ate, then where you went to sleep off your hangover after you ate and drank and partied. That's the 3 books. So I'm going to talk about this book, the stuff that went into making it, the delay through COVID. This was supposed to be out, I think, in the fall of last year. But everything, the publishing industry got, pushed way back because of COVID. So I'm going to talk about this book in relation to that. May the 24th, which is the release date. It's a Monday. I'm going to do an extra live stream. So if you like these, great. If not, maybe it'll be a whole new cast of characters that'll come check it out. But it's going to be a book launch live stream because with all my books, I do launch events. This is the first one that I can't do, at least in person. So I'm going to do it for everyone on Instagram. Hopefully you'll like it. I'm going to have some photos and some stories from the book. So that'll be fun. But that's also going to be in episode 21 of the podcast. And then this is another one that hits home for longtime Cape Codders. I'd say anyone that grew up in the 70s, at least through the 90s, will appreciate this on Cape Cod. In 5th grade, many of the schools down here, you got to go and spend a week at the Cape Cod National Seashore. I don't know anyone that sees this after if you have memories of staying at the seashore. But, oh, man, I thought this was the time of year that I went. That was in 1989 in 5th grade. Holy Lord. But it's the place that we stayed at is still there. It's a youth hostel. And so we stayed there. There were dorms with bunks. I think they still have those. I was looking at pictures of it. And you got to get in touch with nature. That whole beach out there in Truro, it's near Ballston Beach. So there are stretches of that beach where there's nobody for thousands of feet. I don't want to say miles, Jesus. But so as kids, 11, 12 years old, going out there, it was a lot of fun. Some kids got in trouble and did stupid things. I tell a really funny story on the podcast about my most cherished memory of my week at the seashore, and it has nothing to do with me or learning. It has to do with someone getting in trouble. And I don't want to spoil it because it's like I said, I try not to embellish things with my stories because some of these things that happen, I just can't believe they were real. But they are. I've always made the joke that my life is like an episode of the TV show Seinfeld where the most random stuff would happen to the characters on that show. And that's what happens to me a lot. So that's episode 21. Following it up, I have another shorter episode. I didn't intend for this to be in the month of May, but May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So it timed out better. There's the ribbon. You can't see it because my little photo's there. So I'm doing a shorter podcast. It's about 24 minutes. It'll drop on the 27th, which is a Thursday. And it has to do with just mental health. The singer Chris Cornell, I don't know who anyone is familiar with. He was the lead singer for Soundgarden. He did a lot of solo work. He was one of the big icons of grunge music and the alternative movement in the 90s. He was an audio slave with members of Rage Against the Machine. And later on, as he got older, he reformed Soundgarden. He got more into not necessarily acoustic rock, but it was like he changed his musical style as he got older. But his story, essentially why it ties in, is the last show that he did, May of 2017 with Soundgarden, that he finished, got off stage, went back to his hotel room and killed himself. And it spoke to me because it's another huge name that I grew up with, just loving their music, like Kurt Cobain and Nirvana. Kurt Cobain was my biggest influence on me that wasn't a family member. So it spoke to me. And I've had my own battles with depression and dealing with the stigma that comes from that. And what I'm doing with this short podcast is I'm really pulling back the curtain on my own situations I've dealt with. I mean, I think a lot of people have been dealing with mental health issues because of COVID. And at the end of all of my podcasts, if you've listened, I say take care of your mental health. It's the most important thing, especially now. And I say it for anyone listening that needs to hear it, but I say it for myself too, like reminding me, don't forget, take care of your own mental health. And so it was an episode I intended to do for June, found out it was Mental Health Awareness Month. I said I should stick it in this month. And if it helps other people to hear me speak on it, then that's great, because it's really very personal, but, you know, I don't mind sharing it because it's something a lot more people go through than you think. So I hardly think that I'll be the only one, that mentions it. Like, anyone that listens on the podcast will probably relate. So that's going to be episode 22. I'm trying not to get too far ahead in episodes I record because of the fact that if anything happens, like tomorrow, if something big happens, I've got podcasts recorded out to the end of the month, so I'd have to wait for episode 23. So I don't want to I could literally record the next 10 episodes, but then, I don't want to have it where I have to go back and edit them. Another thing that I've been doing with the podcast is I started a Buy Me a Coffee account. What that is, it's like Patreon. It's like Venmo. It's like PayPal for people if they want to donate to the podcast. And it's not something that I really push, but I like having the option if someone enjoys what I do, because this is what I want to do. The whole content creation thing has been my goal, like to just do things like this, because I've got the podcast, I've got my books, I've got photography, I have the blog, I have YouTube videos. I mean, I'm everywhere with my content. So I'm always figuring if someone appreciates it, that's great. I'll keep doing it even if they don't. You never know who might see what. And so basically the Buy Me a Coffee thing is if you want to donate. And I've had people donate, and the thing that I say to them is any money that gets donated to the Buy Me a Coffee I've been using to make ads for Facebook and Instagram. So it's basically like reinvesting in myself. And they've worked. It's great. I really appreciate anyone that, takes the time to donate. But more than that, anyone that takes the time to listen to the podcast, share it, review it. I just got my 4th 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. So I've been promoting that, because if people search and find my podcast and it's got just all these 5-star reviews, then nothing speaks to the success of a podcast than having listeners enjoy it, share it, and review it. Because I'm obviously going to say it's great. If I came on here and said, my podcast sucks, don't listen, what the hell's the point? So it's at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Pandora Music. It's all over there. And they're all related. New England travel and history, lifestyle topics. I'm bringing a little more of those in. Random craziness like the restaurant Storytime. Interesting topics like I do dedication to the craft photography segments to help with anyone if you want to become, I don't want to say a better photographer because I'm no pro, but it's little things that might help that maybe I see and do that some people don't. I don't know. And obviously I do the retro stuff, which people seem to like the retro stuff because that's something everyone can relate to. Not everyone can relate to New England history. I try to make it interesting, I swear. Like this week on the podcast, episode 19, I do time capsules with the This Week in History. So I picked May 9th, 1992. And what I do is I give you the number one movie, song, TV show, and I'll find something to like give you the price of. I've done price of a new car, average price of a home for different ones. And those are just fun little snippets, especially if you were alive then and you remember. I think the number one song was Jump by Criss Cross, if anyone remembers them. I think one of them is actually dead. They were, well, yeah, they still are younger than me when they got involved in music. So I said, hey, maybe I can do that. Nope. No, I can't. And another thing, I was saving this to the end. So in the whole scheme of marketing myself, marketing the podcast, I have decided that I'm going to actually start a TikTok page. I've had people recommend it to me. My mother was the one that really pushed for it. And what I'm going to do is it's going to be related to the podcast and my content. I'm not going to go on there and do dance videos and stuff. I thought that's all it was. And then my mother was like, no, it's way more than that. So I was kind of like, why don't I do it? What I'm going to try to do, for anyone that's interested, I'm going to try to get my first video up tomorrow. They have to be 60 seconds or less. So what I've decided, and here's my catchy title, I'm going to do videos called 60 Seconds of Setterlund. And what I'm going to do with each one is start by picking topics from podcast episodes. Likely it'll be episode 1, Deacon John Doan, who was my 9th great grandfather. When I say I'm a 12th generation Cape Codder, he's the link. So I'm going to try to jam-pack his story in 60 seconds and then tell people, if you want to hear the whole thing, here's the link to the podcast episode. And we'll see from there. Maybe it's something that brings in new viewers. Maybe it's a colossal flop for me, but who knows? So that, yeah, TikTok is my new thing. I'm going to try it tomorrow. Just remember, if you haven't listened to the podcast, definitely give it a listen. Any of the episodes, I'm hoping you'll find something you like in them. But, that's not up to me. I think all of them are great. But thank you so much for tuning in to this live stream, number 12. I'll be back next Friday for Lucky 13. So the 13th on Friday. There you go. Maybe I'll wear my Friday the 13th hockey mask for it. No, maybe I won't. But thank you again. This will go up on IGTV right after, and then I'll try to put it on YouTube with chapters so you can skip around. The last few weeks, they've been running long, where I've been going 45 minutes. So I'm trying to condense, get in and out, because if I start rambling, then it just goes and goes and goes. So have a great rest of the night, great weekend. It's going to be beautiful tomorrow. I plan an early morning bike ride to try to burn some of this Popcorners chips that I added on to myself. And remember, episode 20 of the podcast drops tomorrow, dedicated to my grandpa. So I hope you all will check it out and let me know what you think. And other than that, have a great weekend, and I will see you again sooner than later. Good night, everybody.